Hi everyone, it's Lisa. Thank you so much for joining me today. In today's video, I'm going to be making 18 cards with the Echo Park Let's Go Camping 6x6 paper pad. And this paper pad is perfect for masculine cards. And with Father's Day coming up, I thought it would be perfect to make several masculine cards. So I want to start off by showing you the 6x6 paper pad, and I'm just going to do a quick flip through. You can see there are some cut aparts, there are some RVs. Those would also be perfect for a retirement card. And then you can see all of the dark colors. There's some dark greens and some dark blues, some more cut aparts, which I don't end up using all of those cut aparts because some of them just weren't right for card making. They were more geared towards scrapbooking, so I'll be able to save those and use in my traveler's notebooks if I so choose to do that. So that is the paper pad. They also have a 12 by 12 paper pad, which I did not purchase. There's also some ephemera and some tag ephemera packs that you can purchase in addition. I did pick up the 12 by 12 sticker sheet because I will be using that, and I will be bringing in some of my own solid color cardstock, the colors shown here, as well as a few other colors. I'll also be using some of my cut and scored Amazon card bases. I will have links to all of these products in the description box below in case you're interested. So for card one, I have this blue star paper. It measures 4 by 5 1/4. I also have a piece of craft cardstock. It's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, which I show the craft cardstock here because I initially thought I was going to use it, but I end up switching later on to green cardstock. So that craft layer on the table will be switched out with green. I also took a border die and die cut some craft cardstock, and I'm just inking it up with some ginger snap ink just to add some texture and dimension to it. And I'm going to add it to the bottom of my star paper. So I'm just going to apply some liquid glue to the back and then add it to the star paper and press that down. And then I'm just going to trim off the excess cardstock. And then here's where I pulled in that green paper. I just thought the green would look much better with the whole scene I'm trying to create. So I add that to the green cardstock. I am using this Happy Camper sticker from the 12 by 12 sticker sheet, and I just added that to a piece of white cardstock. Trimmed it down so that there's a little bit of a white border, and then I also added it to a piece of the green cardstock and trimmed that down so there's a little bit of a green border showing. Next, I'm going to take these stickers from the sticker sheet. I have one of the tent, I have a sleeping bag, I have a water bottle, and I'm also going to bring in some trees, and I'm just going to create a little scene here. I'm just putting some cardstock on the back of the top of that water bottle because it was kind of uneven on those multiple layers of cardstock, so I just wanted to even it out so it was easier to press down and adhere to that paper. And then there's my trees. I'm also going to add some stars, and I will add that to one of my pre-cut and scored A2 size card bases. And then I decide to come back in and add this sticker of the moon with the stars, so I just repositioned some of those other star stickers to make it look a little bit better. I thought that moon added some nice color to that card. So that completes card one. And moving on to my second card, I will be using a card sketch, which is OWH12. And I will use several card sketches throughout this video when I make my 18 cards. And I want to let you know up front that some of the card sketches do have measurements and some do not, so I'll create my own. But even the ones that do have measurements on them, I don't always follow those measurements. And I will make sure that in my blog post, I have all of the measurements to all of the layers that I create these cards with. So if you want to recreate any of these cards, go over to my blog at Lisa Mears Designs. There will be a link down in the description box, and you will see pictures as well as all of the measurements. So I have a piece of navy blue cardstock. The largest piece is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then I have that craft pattern paper, which is 4 by 5 1/4, which was attached to that. And then the strip of blue solid is 2 3/8 by 4 7/8, and then the blue plaid pattern paper is 2 1/4 by 4 3/4. So this is a stamp set called Stamps for Guys. It was recently released from the Stamps of Life, and since I used the fishing pole and the fish, I thought that this sentiment, "You're really cool," would look perfect for this card. I did stamp it out in some brown ink, and I die cut it with the Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiment Banners die, and then I just backed it up on some navy blue cardstock so that it has a little bit of navy blue edge there. I'm just adding some extra cardstock here because I wanted to make sure those layers were even when I add this to my card. So I add it there, and then I'll add that entire layer to an A2 size card base. And then I will add a few epoxy dots. I'm going to use the same color that is in the fish, so it's like a light green color, just to bring that color out some more in this card. So here is my completed card, and moving on to card 3, I will be using the Mojo Monday Sketch 533, and I start out with a small rectangle that is cut to 3 1/2 by 2 1/4, and I also cut a wave die out of this dark blue cardstock. Since this is a nighttime scene, I wanted to create water that looked darker, so I chose to use the dark blue, and I just added that there to the bottom of that rectangle, and then I'm just trimming off the excess. I will be adding a canoe to this scene, so it'll look like the canoe is in the water in the evening. And then I just add the paddle right there across the canoe. And then I'm going to add that layer to a white layer that measures 3 3/4 by 2 3/8. The red strip measures 2 by 3 1/2. I also have a strip with it, which is a striped strip of paper, which measures 4 by 3/4 inches. And then the large blue plaid paper is 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm just positioning everything where I want it. And notice that the card sketch, that strip of striped paper that I have, it shows it much larger, but that was a scrap that I have, so that's why I used a much smaller piece. I'm also using this Enjoy stamp, which I've already stamped out. That is from the Sandals for Summer stamp set from the Stamps of Life. I'm just adding a little piece of cardstock on the bottom, a couple little pieces there, just because I'm putting this sentiment on some uneven layers, some layers that are thicker than others, and I just wanted to make sure that it was even. And then I'm going to add this layer to a larger red piece of cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then that will go onto an A2 size card base. And just so you know, an A2 size card base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then to finish up this card, I'm just going to add some red epoxy dots, a couple there on the top and one at the bottom, just to create a little bit of a triangle design with those epoxy dots, and that will complete that card. For my next card, I die cut a piece of green cardstock using the Trinity Stamps Scenic Border die. It's one of their grass dies. And I just inked it up with some of the artichoke ink from the Stamps of Life, and I'm going to add it here to the bottom of this small rectangle piece of pattern paper that measures 3 1/2 by 2 1/4. So once I add that and it's straight, I will trim off the excess green cardstock. I'm going to add this sticker of the moose and add a tree to this little scene, and I'm just going to ink up the edges there with some of that, more of that green ink. And then I'm going to add this to a piece of red cardstock that measures 3 3/4 by 2 3/8. And I have to say that this card is going to be my absolute favorite card out of all 18. I just love the way that it's going to turn out. So I am going to add this to a piece of craft cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then I have the word wild that I die cut using the Skinny Mini alphabet dies from the Stamps of Life. And I love how thick these dies are because I die cut them with pattern paper, and you can see that plaid, that red and black pattern showing through on those letters. So I'm going to go ahead and finish adding these letters to the actual card layer. And once those are added, I'm going to take out my Misti stamping platform, position that layer with some magnets on the platform so that I can position these two small stamps. The one on the top says have a, and the one at the bottom says day. So it will say have a wild day. And then I'm going to add that to a top folding red A2 size card base. And then that will complete this card. I just love the way that card turned out. So moving on to card 5, I am going to be using the Mojo Monday Sketch 522. The wood grain pattern paper measures 2 by 3 1/4, and I did ink that up with some brown ink, and then it's going to be layered onto a piece of brown cardstock that measures 2 1/8 by 3 3/8, and I'm just adding this little scene with the fire and then the marshmallows, just trimming off the ends of those stickers before I add it to that solid piece of brown cardstock. And then I have some more layers here, this tree with a tent paper that measures 4 by 2 3/4, and I'm just adding it there to the center of this green pattern paper that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then I will add the little scene that I created right on top of that. So you can see I'm following the sketch pretty well. I do bring in a stamp set. This sentiment says a birthday toast. This is from the Toast to Stamp set from the Stamps of Life. So I stamped that out with some brown ink on a stitched oval die, and then I just inked up the edges with some green ink. And here I was just trying to determine if I wanted to put it in the middle or if I wanted to put it at the bottom right. And I ultimately chose the bottom right, and I did put some double-sided adhesive foam on the back of that oval and then just add it there to that layer, and then that entire layer will go on an A2 size white card base. And that will complete that card. And moving on to card 6, I have a piece of white cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and I took a 3-inch circle die and I die cut a circle in the top middle of that cardstock sheet. And I want to create some stitching around that circle. So I have this die set. It actually puts stitching into the cardstock. It doesn't actually cut a circle out. So I used one of the dies that's slightly larger than that hole I already die cut, and then ran that through my die cut machine, and you can see that stitching around the circle. And that is a die set from the Stamps of Life, and I will link it down below in case you're interested. So I die cut another one of the scenic border dies from Trinity Stamps out of some green cardstock. Just ink that up with some green ink, and I'm just creating a little scene here underneath my circle. I also have this piece of blue star pattern paper that measures 3 3/4 by 4 that will go right underneath that circle. So I'm just adding some glue to the blue pattern paper and then adding the grass directly to the top of that and trimming off the excess cardstock. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a tent sticker. So I chose to use this blue one, and I'm just going to add it there in the grass. And then I'm going to add these two layers together. So I have the white layer, and I'm just going to flip this over and attach that scene piece to the back side just with some double-sided tape. And I'm just going to add some glue on the inside there because I wanted to make sure I had a good seal on this little window. So I'm just going to press that down. And I decided to add a sentiment directly to the front of this white cardstock. And I chose to use the sentiment Campy Birthday. Just use a little pun there instead of happy birthday, campy birthday. I thought would be super cute. So I'm just using some small alphabet stamps that I had in my stash. And these stamps that I'm using are so old, they aren't even for sale anymore. So just use what you have in your stash. You can even use stickers if you had alphabet stickers and wanted to spell out Campy Birthday, or just use another sentiment altogether. But these stamps measure 1 5/8 inches tall, so they're not too big, and that's why I chose to use them, because I was limited on the space that I had on this card front. And using the Misti on this card front worked perfectly because, as you can see, I didn't get a good impression the first time, so I had to stamp it a few extra times to get that solid black impression. So I go ahead and add some twine around the card layer. And I do snip off some of the twine on the back side of the middle of that card layer so I don't have so much bulk when I add this to my card base. So I'm going to add that to a craft A2 size top fold card base. And to get your top folding card base, just take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock, cut it at 4 1/4 down the 8.5 inch side, and score at 5.5. So I just added some epoxy dots, and that completes that card. For my next card, I'm using Paper Play Sketch number 22, and I have this piece of green tree pattern paper that's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and I'm taking this striped paper, which was one of my scraps from a previous card, and that measures 4 1/8 by 1 1/4. I also have a circle that I cut out of a circle die, and that is a 2.5 inch circle. So I'm just adding that there. But notice that with the card sketch, I'm just adding my circle to the opposite side because I'm going to bring in this picture of an RV, or the sticker of an RV. And since the truck is pointing towards the right, I wanted my circle on the opposite side of the card. So I'm going to go ahead and add this layer to a top folding craft A2 size card base, and I did add the Adventure is Calling sticker from the sticker sheet. This card would be perfect for a retirement card. And I added some epoxy dots there, and that will complete this card. For my next card, I decided to use one of the cut aparts from this sheet. And so I decided to go ahead and cut all of these cut aparts out. I will use most of them on the next few cards that I create, but I will not use all of them because some were more geared towards scrapbooking than card making. So I have this sketch, which is OWH sketch number 12, and I'm gonna follow the actual layout but not necessarily the measurements. You can see that that green strip of paper is much smaller than what the sketch shows. My green strip is 2 by 5 3/8, and that one shows much larger. I'm just using the scraps that I have that I used from previous cards, so that's why I'm using a much smaller piece, but it all works out perfectly anyway. So I go ahead and take this cut apart You Are My Greatest Adventure, and I add that to a piece of craft cardstock that measures 2 1/8 by 2 1/8. That cut apart is a 2 by 2 inch square, so I just did it 1/8 inch larger on all sides. I do add that little arrow sticker just for an accent, and then I add this to an A2 size top folding card base that's a craft color. And then I decide to add some twine around the top, and I kind of was making it a little bit spread out. I didn't want it to be perfectly straight, and I go ahead and tie this in a knot. I did not want to tie it in a bow since this is a masculine card, so I just cut off the edges and just kind of make that twine a little bit spread out there at the top. And that will complete this card. And moving on to my next card, I am going to be using Freshly Made Sketch number 149. So I'm using another 2 by 2, and I'm going to add that to a piece of black cardstock, again measuring 2 1/8 by 2 1/8. And then I have this piece of triangle pattern paper that measures 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm adding that to a piece of black cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then I have these pieces of solid craft cardstock strips that I cut 2 strips to 3 3/4 by 1/2. And I'm just going to add them there to the middle of that card layer. And once those are added, I'm going to add the sentiment right on top, directly in the middle of that card. That's going to go on a top folding A2 size craft card base. And that will complete this card. For my next card, I have a Freshly Made Sketch number 72. I'm using that as my inspiration. I have a piece of craft cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. That triangle pattern paper is 3 5/8 by 4. And then I'm just adding these other 2 strips. The blue strip is 1 1/8 by 4. The green strip is 1 1/8 by 4, and just adding those there to my card layer. Notice that some of those strips and pieces of paper have the little holes from where you hang the paper pad on the rack, and I decided to use them anyway because they're going to be covered up with the sentiment. So you can still use those pieces of your pattern paper, just make sure you hide those little circles or holes. So I have the 2x2 Just Stay Wild. That's added to a piece of craft cardstock that measures 2 1/8 by 2 1/8. I do add the bear sticker and then add that to a top folding blue A2 size card base, and that completes that card. Moving on, I'm using freshly made sketch number 47, and I have some of these strips of paper. The red strip is 2 5/8 by 3/4 inches. The green one is 2 by 1/2 inch. The triangle pattern paper strip is 1.5 inch by 1/2 inch. And those are added to that blue and white star paper that's 2 1/4 by 3.5. And then I'm going to add the RV right there on top. I also have the sleeping bag pattern paper that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then I'm going to bring in the Let's Go Exploring sticker, and I'm going to add that there to the front of the card. Now, if I would have thought about this after looking at this card, I probably would have put another layer underneath that blue with the white star paper. I just think another layer would have looked so much better, maybe another white layer or some other color to kind of separate those papers. And that entire layer will be placed on an A2 size top folding craft cardstock, and that will complete this card. My next card, I am going to be using this Adventure Awaits You. It's a very small square from one of the sheets of pattern paper. And I'm using the freshly made sketch number 456. And I'm going to be creating 2 cards with this sketch. So I have a piece of red cardstock. That larger piece is 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. The plus sign pattern paper is 5 1/4 by 4. So those were attached to each other. And then I have this plaid strip that measures 1 by 5 inches. I also have the RV paper that measures 4 by 3, and then the red paper under that is 4 1/8 by 3 1/8. And then that little square is 1 by 1 inches, and I backed that up on a piece of red cardstock that measures 1 1/8 by 1 1/8, and then just put that on an A2 size card base. This card is another perfect card for a retirement card because of the sentiment Adventure Awaits You, and with the RVs I thought it would be super cute. So I'm just adding some epoxy dots to the front of that, and again I did create 2 cards with this sketch. And here are my completed cards. So moving on to my next card, I'm creating a mini slimline card. I actually found this card sketch online. It's a Mojo Monday sketch 553 for a mini slimline card. And I have this tree pattern paper that measures 5 1/4 by 3 3/4, and I'm layering that onto a piece of solid red cardstock that's 3 5/8 by 5 7/8. And then I have this other piece of red pattern paper that measures 2 1/4 by 4, and I'm layering that on to a piece of red solid cardstock that's 2 3/8 by 3 7/8. And then I'm using the cut apart You Are My Greatest Adventure and adding that to a piece of red cardstock that's 2 1/8 by 2 1/8. I also have a piece of craft color cardstock, which is just a strip that measures 3 1/4 by 1/2 inch. And then I have this green little strip that measures 3 1/4 by 1/8 inch. So I'm just going to add all of those layers there. I'm taking this little piece of cardstock and just adding it to the corners because I'm adding this strip to multi-layers on my card, and I wanted to make sure it adheres flat. So just adding a couple strips there to the back to thicken up this cardstock. And then I'm going to add the sentiment square, again adding some extra cardstock to the side because it's going to be off of that other layer. And then the card base is going to be a craft card base. So to cut a mini slimline card base, you're going to take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock, cut it to 7 by 6, score at 3.5 on the 7-inch side. So your final card will be 3.5 by 6 inches. For my next card, I'm using this cut apart Life is Made for Good Friends and Great Adventures. So I'm just going to cut that out. And I'm going to be using OWH Sketch 46. So I have a piece of red, solid red cardstock that's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. That pattern paper is 4 by 5 1/4, just layering those on. The brown wood grain paper is 1 7/8 by 5 1/4. So I'm just going to add that to the front of that card layer. And then I have this larger red piece, which is 2.5 by 3.5. And then the sentiment is going to go towards the top of that. And that sentiment is a 2 by 2 3/4 inches. And I put it towards the top instead of like the card sketch shows that it should go towards the bottom. I chose to flip it around just because I wanted to add this deer sticker, and I wanted to make sure that that sticker did not overlap the sentiment in any way. So I'm going to go ahead and add the sentiment to the card front, and then I will add the deer sticker right to the top of that. And then I will add that to a card base, an A2 size card base in the craft color, and that will complete this card. For my next card, I'm using Freshly Made Sketch number 295, and I have this large red cardstock. It's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and I'm going to add that sleeping bag pattern paper, which is 4 by 5 1/4. I also die cut 2 circles. I have a white stitch circle, and that's a 2 3/4 inch circle, and then the pattern paper with the blue and the white stars, that is a 2.5 inch circle. And I also used the Trinity stamp grass die as I did in the previous cards. And this was just a scrap from an earlier card that I used. I didn't even need to die cut it again because I had extra. And I just went ahead and added that to the bottom of the blue circle, and then I will add that to the white circle. The red strip is 4 by 1/2 inch, so I'm going to go ahead and add that there to the card front. And then I will add that little scene with the circle there off to the left. I'm also going to be bringing in one of the tent stickers, so I add that there to my scene. I'll also be bringing in a couple of the star stickers, and I'll add that there to the scene as well. So for the sentiment, I'm actually going to be using the Enjoy sentiment. I believe I used that in a previous card. I'm going to be stamping it onto that little red strip, but I'm going to be doing some embossing. So I just take my powder tool, rub it over top of that red strip, and then ink up my stamp with the Versamark ink, and then stamp that right on top of that red strip. And then I'm going to take some white embossing powder and sprinkle it over the top, and I'm just going to shake off the excess back in that jar, and then I'll be able to use my heat tool to heat up and melt that embossing powder. And that gives a nice white crisp impression, so that's why I love using that white embossing powder for sentiments, especially on dark cardstock. And then I'm just going to add that layer to an A2 size white card base and add a few red epoxy dots to the front of that card, and that will complete this card. For my next card, I'm using OWH sketch number 79. I'm using this cut apart that says life is a journey, don't forget to enjoy the ride, and I back that up onto some red solid cardstock that measures 3 1/8 by 2 1/8. So I was showing you that there was a little hole in the top of this pattern paper. So what I'm going to do to block that hole or to cover it up is I'm just going to move all the stripes to the opposite side. So instead of them being on the left, just as this card sketch shows, I'm going to put them on the right and strategically place them so that one of the stripes is over that hole. So this RV paper is 5 1/4 by 4, and then it's on a piece of red cardstock that's 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. These strips are 3 strips in the green plaid paper, and they each measure 1/2 inch by 4 inches. So I'm going to add each one of them, just trying to eyeball them equal distance apart, again covering up that hole. And then I'm going to put some double-sided adhesive foam on the back of this cut apart, and then I'm going to add that to the card front. And that entire layer will go on an A2 size white card base, and that will complete this card. And moving on, for my last card, I'm using the OWH sketch number 37. So I have several layers for this card. So I'm using this cut apart. It says camping, the great outdoors, go take a hike, eat s'mores, catch a fish, tell stories, at the campfire, find your adventure. So that's going to be backed up on a piece of brown cardstock that measures 2 by 3 inches. And then I have some of these other layers here. I have the large pattern paper. That large pattern paper is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and it's backed up onto a piece of brown cardstock that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. The tent with the tree paper, that is 2 1/2 by 4 3/4, and that's backed up onto a piece of brown cardstock that measures 2 5/8 by 4 7/8. Then that solid green with the tree strip that measures 3 3/4 by 1 1/2, and that's backed onto some brown that measures 3 7/8 by 1 5/8. I'm just adding some extra cardstock layers underneath this strip just to make everything even. And I know these are a lot of measurements, so again, please go to my blog. The link will be in the description box below, so you'll be able to see all of these cards with the pictures as well as all of the measurements for each one of the cards. And all of the supplies will be in the blog as well as in the description box below, so you'll be able to have those in both places. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish putting this card together, just adding some extra cardstock layers here so that these cardstock pieces end up being completely even on these card layers. I am going to bring in some of the stickers from the 12 by 12 sticker sheet. I'm going to be bringing in a tent as well as some trees, and I think that will add a nice addition to this card layer. I do have to add an extra cardstock strip to the bottom of that tent, actually 2 strips, just to make that even because there are several layers of cardstock underneath it. And then here I'm going to go ahead and add this to my card base, and then the trees are an actual afterthought, so you'll see me go back in here and add some trees. I just thought it needed something more, so I add a larger one, and then right next to it I'm going to add a smaller one, but I'm going to pop it up on some foam just so it has some dimension, and that completes this card. So here's a look at all 18 cards that I created with this 6x6 paper pad. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know which your favorite one was. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you like card making tutorials such as this, go ahead and click that subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications so that you'll be notified every time I release a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.